As always, remember to like the stream, and if you're not a subscriber, please hit the button. We will be getting to the comments later on at the end, so if you please make sure you can put some in the chat, and we will try and get to as many as we can. So let's actually do the actual first story now. So, after years of maybe later, a cluster of Western countries have finally struck fresh ink on the state of Palestine rubber stamp, but France obviously fired first with the starting gun last week, and then the UK have sprinted in right behind, with Keir Starmer insisting the paperwork only gets filed at the September UN's General Assembly unless Israel calls a ceasefire, unfreezes the aid, and recommits to a two-state solution. Canada says it will also do the same. It will lodge its own recognition at the same New York get-together, while Portugal, Malta, and if Brussels politics lines up, Belgium will also be set to follow. Now, that's to 2024's. Sorry, can't get my words out today. I'm having one of those days. Now, to add to the 2024 list of people who also recognize the Palestinian state, we had the Iberian Nordic trio. We had Spain, Ireland, and Norway. And now that brings up the UN tally of countries recognizing Palestine has climbed to 147. So, predictably, Israel is absolutely livid. Israel's foreign ministry branded London's move a reward for Hamas, warning it will only harden its position. Washington's reaction is also kind of split and a bit of a mess, really. I don't know if anybody else saw this week, but President Trump publicly scolded Starmer for rewarding terror the day after he apparently told him in Scotland he didn't really mind. Now, inside the UK, 40 Lords peers have claimed recognition is unlawful because Palestine, under international law, I'm going to try that one again. It's one of those days, guys. It's one of those days. So 40 lords have claimed that recognition would be unlawful under international law, not that they ever care about international law. And ministers counter that the International Court of Justice has already affirmed the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Now, let's look at Lady Deitch, who is leading the charge from the House of Lords, and what she had to say today.
Well, let's speak
oh my God, I'm a mess today.
Ruth Deitch, who has played a leading role in this letter in terms of drafting it. Baroness Deitch, thank you very much for being with us. Now, before we talk about the letter and the process and that convention, could you just establish, removed from the legality, in principle, are you in favour of the recognition of a Palestinian state by this country?
No, I'm not, because it definitely would break the law. And of course, one has to remember that at least 4 times in the last few decades, Palestinians have been offered a state and rejected it, going back to 1938, right through to as recently as 2008. So no, I'm not in favour. But the main reason is not political. It's just a question of straightforward law. The Montevideo Convention has never been challenged. It was based on the existing international law, and it now counts as customary law. And this country is definitely bound by it, as the Prime Minister must know.
Now, apparently, my mic was on at the beginning of that clip when I said how much of a mess I am today, so apologies for that. It's just one of those days, and my cat is now meowing in the background. But now, she's obviously an objective politician and lawyer, right? It's simply just a matter of objective law, right? No mention from Sky News about her background at all in any way, nothing at all, because according to UN Watch, which is actually an Israeli-funded propaganda website, it quotes Lady Deitch in February 2024 at the International Summit for Future Beyond UNRWA, specifically saying, UNRWA has poisoned the mind of future generations in a way it has taught Palestinian children to hate, to believe lies about Israel. It's given make-believe employment to thousands of Palestinians. It continues the myth that there are millions of Palestinian refugees who are, in fact, not Palestinian and not even refugees. So yeah, she doesn't even believe in the concept of Palestinians, and just refuses to call them refugees. Great lady, very objective. She also works with and was the director, one of the directors of the Jewish National Fund. Now, according to Declassified UK, the JNF was founded as a settler colonial organization in 1901, decades before Israel's existence, to buy land and promote settlements in Palestine. By 2007, the JNF owned 13% of all land in Israel, all of which is off limits to Palestinians. The Council for Israeli Land Administration, which determines policy for public lands in the country, allocates half of its seats to the JNF, thereby granting the organization an absolutely staggering level of power. Its British branch, the JNF UK, has been involved in funding Israeli troops through financial support for training and pre- and post-military programs. It has also supported settlers that displace Palestinians and militia groups that perpetrate violence in illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. So, completely objective. Yeah, she's a completely fair guest. No pushback from Sky News and about her background, who she is, anything that she's supported or said in the past. Great job, Sky News. Also, as well, multiple people have just labeled this as, peers push back on Palestinian recognition, again, without noting who some of these people are, their backgrounds, and what they're attached to. It's not a matter of objective law, it's ideology and complete bias. Now, Starmer's carrot and stick formula, which is recognition unless Israel behaves, has infuriated both sides. Beyond the Westminster bubble as well, the other European countries are waning. Obviously, Belgium's leader calls immediate recognition the only credible route to peace, and Portugal's PM says Lisbon will recognize Palestine by September, but with, again, some of the same caveats. But in short, the diplomatic dam is cracking, but the water is obviously very muddy. With conditions, counter conditions, and the looming UN vote, September could decide whether this recognition wave becomes, tidal or just another ripple in the endless peace process paddling pool. That's a mouthful. Why did I write it like that? A little bit of a tongue twister. But I'll start that again. Or just another ripple in the endless peace process paddling pool while Palestinians continue to be murdered and starved and continue to be dispossessed. Not full. Besides the little stupid tongue twister that I had there at the ending, what's your kind of take on all of this? Because it's conditional for some countries. Some countries are just going ahead with it. It seems a bit of a mess. Starmer's pissed off both sides. What are your thoughts on it all?
I think the first thing is to recognize that the tide in the Western world is sort of shifting because of Israel's blockade and siege on the Gaza Strip. So there is definitely an element of wanting to upkeep the not just support for Israel, but also to basically fool your major population that the siege in Gaza isn't that bad if Israel gets everything controlled. And I think there's a more sinister aspect to the idea that a Palestinian statehood is only conditional on whether or not armed groups in Palestine are fighting and also if the conflict ends. Because if we follow that same line of logic, Israel really should have never began to be a state in the first place because they had far right militia that were attacking the Brits in the Palestinian Mandate. And the genocide which is going on right now should really legitimize them as a settler occupational state, which are hell bent on displacing Palestinians from any remaining ground. And I think it's really interesting you brought that clip on Sky News of the JNF, because if you ask me personally, I think the Jewish National Fund should be considered a terrorist organization. The extract from Declassified UK talks about how it started as a settler colonial occupation, but it doesn't go deep down into how the JNF helped to arm settlements, how they ethnically cleansed Palestinians from the most fertile soils that their generations had been farming for hundreds of years, nor how they helped to drive out Palestinians to the Brits that were armed resistance groups against, groups like the Irgun. And so I genuinely think that the idea of a conditional Palestinian statehood really shows us not just the history of Zionist lobbying that has overtaken our politicians that we don't push back on and spokespeople, but also the idea of Palestinians being equated to the actions of Hamas, which is completely racist in its own conception to begin with.
Yeah, as well today, I was reading another statement from a minister who was saying there are no innocents in Gaza. This continues. What frustrates me about all of this is that even if you put Gaza aside, which I know sounds awful, but even just thinking about the West Bank in itself, right? We've watched for decades as they've slowly dispossessed Palestinians. Basically, a slower colonial project. They have a crazy amount of power over the West Bank and how it runs. They essentially control the banks and how money comes through in and out of the West Bank. So when Palestinians, farm olives and make olive oil that is sold on the global market, that money goes to Israel first, and it's up to them if they want to give it to them or not. Right now, they're withholding billions to the Palestinian Authority that they owe them. And they already have an immense amount of power over there, and we have slowly watched this colonization continue. So even without what is happening in Gaza, it just seems like there's a part of me that just feels like no matter what happens, no matter what moves are made, no matter what is done, Palestine recognition or not, even if we even if we went out of our way to blockade, which will never happen, right? Trade blockade, everything that we could possibly do, I still feel like this is just going to continue, because if Israel is anything, it can be patient. Obviously, right now, they're the opposite of that. But what I mean by that is, if they're facing an insurmountable amount of backlash now, it doesn't matter. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it seems like the pattern is, let's say we mount the attack against them in terms of everything that we can do. It just feels like they'll just wait for somebody else to come into power who will let them do it again. Obviously, that person right now is Trump, but I'm just talking about like the rest of the Western allies. We've got, obviously, Kemi Badenoch saying this is not the right time, and they wouldn't do anything about it anyway. We've got Nigel Farage, who he could become prime minister in a few years, but we'll talk about that later, saying obviously the same thing. So it just seems like the conditionality of it, even if Israel starts to behave, which I don't think they will, they're just going to wait it out. They'll just continue doing it again in the future. So I don't really know what the actual solution is. And that's kind of a question posed to you. Like, what else does the future of all this look like?
No, I think you raise a really good point, because it exposes the fact that we're not in the West doing nearly enough, and our politicians aren't holding Israel to account. If you need to use the racist idea of a conditional Palestinian state on the behalf of what's going on in Gaza, then we need to understand that the real things that actually work are not conditional. They are full arms embargoes on F-35 parts for fighter jets. They are international pressure via sanctions. It's stopping trade, not just ripping up new trade agreements, but genuinely stopping all trade, and understanding that this is not just an issue with the far-right coalition like Smotrich or Ben Gvir, but Netanyahu himself and his cabinet within the Knesset, because Netanyahu is still not being presented by our politicians in the way that he actually is, which is supporting full out from day one the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians. So we need to go a step further in understanding that not only does this reveal the racism that we do have our politicians have of the Palestinians in their own native homeland, but the fact that this alone isn't enough. And like you said, whether it's the Conservatives or whether it's Reform, they are not equipped to deal with, or want to deal with, in fact, I should say, dismantling the Zionist project. The only man, the main man that we've seen in terms of paradigm shift in UK foreign policy was Jeremy Corbyn, and he was called things like a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer. But I think this presents a real good time for the left, and we are seeing Corbyn and Sultana's party, along with Zach Polanski's leadership bid for the Greens, to really challenge and create a new paradigm shift in UK foreign policy. And they have the solutions in order to pressure our politicians and hold them to account in order to provide the Palestinians with the dignity they deserve.
Obviously, we'll have to see how it turns out with, obviously, your party and the momentum that they get with this. But even now, under the current situation, it just feels like politicians are just hoping this will kind of go away so they can ignore it and then just pass it on the next time everything kicks off again. But it's already escalating. I read Israeli media a lot. I cover this a lot. I look into this a lot. I research this a lot. And the impression that I'm getting right now from the statements from the ministers that I'm listening to, that I'm reading about, is that they want everything now because Trump is in power. I was speaking earlier about the idea of, they kind of slow down or stop when they're getting too much backlash. This has been an historical thing, even though what's happening now is unprecedented in the modern history of it all. That they'll just wait for somebody else to come. But kind of almost feels like they don't want to as well. I was reading today that Israel Katz and one of the other bigger ministers was just saying, let's actually fully claim sovereignty over the West Bank, because obviously they recently did their non-binding motion just a week or two ago, but now they're saying, nah, let's just fully go for it. We've got Trump in power. We can get away with it. And what's more interesting about that is we've seen how the pro-Palestine movement has affected multiple countries around the world in terms of how they vote, how it's shifting politics. It feels interesting is just the word I'm going to use, in terms of the Western powers, the way they're reacting to it. Starmer lost multiple seats because of this. He lost a massive chunk of his vote. It's caused more issues for his party consistently out of any other topic since he got elected. And if Israel goes fully ahead with this, I just can't imagine where it's going to go. Because even though they've creeped forward in terms of making some decisions which haven't really affected anything on the ground, some arms sales, they're still getting to them. A few sanctions here, it's not enough. And now, obviously, the recognition of a Palestinian state, possibly. What do you think, basically, if they go all out and just go for everything, do you think the West excluding the US, perhaps, will actually finally just give up on the protection that they've given to Israel, and just take the blow, possibly affecting their power, affecting their elections? Or do you think they'll just hunker down and just hope for the best?
It's a really interesting question. And I think I need to make it clear that they will protect Israel before they protect their image back at home. As long as they support a Zionist project, it doesn't matter what they're going to look like. And that went, and we saw that with the Democrats and both the Republicans within the US, as we're seeing now. And I think it goes for the Labour Party too, especially with the prescription of, for example, Palestine Action. And we will have to see how that plays out in the next couple of weeks. Whether or not they will hunker down a lot more, it's hard to possibly say. I mean, the West as a whole systemically has Israel lobbying it at multiple different levels, not just institutionally, but within our diplomats, our meeting with the BBC. We also have politicians like Luke Akehurst that are in Labour, despite others being purged for anti-Semitism claims. So I do find it difficult to try and assess, because it seems like we are in the politics of doing nothing. And that is only backed up by also Trump, like you said, going full force to be probably the most pro-Israel president we've ever actually seen, with moving the I forgot what it was called, the thing to I think it was Bethlehem.
Yeah, the embassy.
Apologies. Yes, the embassy to Bethlehem, and also along with the fact he's got $100 million of donations from people like Miriam Aldelson. So it does represent a different sphere to, for example, Iraq, which was also similar in the way that it had a massive anti-war movement, but it's a lot more different that this is very documented and it's a lot more personable, considering the fact that we are seeing children on the ground. So I don't really know. I can't really say, but what I do know is when the tide turns, the very first thing the British state will do is protect Israel and protect the Zionist project, and they won't throw them on I can't speak either today. They won't throw them under the bus. They'll just absorb the responsibility on their behalf, as long as it makes Israel look good.
Obviously, we'll have to see what happens. We've still got Palestinians starving on the ground in Gaza, with Israel going full propaganda mode with their social media. I don't know if you've seen some of this. The is it CGOT, whatever they're called? Like, that's the organization who distributes aid in and out of Gaza. They were posting pictures today of an apparent child who went viral for starving to death, but they dispute this because he came to Israel in 2018 to be treated for his genetic condition. And actually, that's the only reason why he's died, only because his genetic condition. Nothing to do with the fact that he has obviously a pre-existing health condition, which is exacerbated by lack of water, food, aid, hygiene, everything that you need for the conditions of life. So they're in full-blown propaganda mode right now, which means they are panicking when you usually see this level of propaganda coming from them. But let's move on to the next story. So I'm going to be interested to see people's comments on this, because there's so many kind of aspects and levels to it. It's been in the story, it's been in the news all this week. There's lots of jokes and memes about it. Obviously, it has some kind of funny sides to it, but also has obviously some more serious, scary sides to it. So since Ofcom activated the Online Safety Act's first enforcement powers this month, 34 adult sites are already under formal investigation for skipping age checks, while Spotify is threatening to zap accounts that don't selfie verify their birthdays. Users are very unimpressed so far. So nearly 400,000 signatures landed on Downing Street in 5 days so far, calling the rules "nanny net gone wild" was one of the quotes. Now, most of these issues are focusing around the services that block under 18s from porn, explicit music, and even Xbox chats, forcing rigorous age checks every time they use it. Now, many platforms now turn to biometric age estimation. Users can scan their faces, software guesses their age, and matches it, or can match an official ID as well. Now, critics warn this piles highly sensitive facial templates into commercial databases, often run from the US. Now, false matches, unequal accuracy for darker skins, and lockouts for adults lacking ID, which affects millions of people. Now, campaigners fear creep. Once mass face capture is normalized, police or advertisers could demand access beyond child protection and erode basic privacy rights. Now, my cat is playing at my feet and scratching at things, so I don't know if you can hear that, so I do apologise. But Nigel Farage has vowed to scrap the act on day one, prompting Cabinet Minister Peter Kyle in an interview to claim he's in effect on the same side as Jimmy Savile. a reference to child safety provisions Farage says are virtue signalling drivel. Let's take a look at the clip.
I see that Nigel Farage is already saying that he's going to overturn these laws. So, we have people out there who are extreme pornographers, peddling hate, peddling violence. Nigel Farage is on their side. Make no mistake about it, if people like Jimmy Savile were alive today, he'd be perpetrating his crimes online. And Nigel Farage is saying that he's on their side.
Well, just to be sort of very clear, I'm not on Jimmy Savile's side. I thought it was an absolutely appalling thing for him to say. Probably shows you just how much trouble they're in as a government. And a very stupid thing to say, given that his own party leader, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, of course, faced a barrage of criticism for not prosecuting Jimmy Savile when he was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service, and subsequently apologised to the nation.
Now, it's rather funny, isn't it, that he's mad at being compared to Jimmy Savile and then tells a lie about Keir Starmer. And I don't like defending Keir Starmer, but we know this has been debunked. He had nothing to do with the case. It's not how the system works. Obviously, that lie was originally peddled by Boris Johnson in Parliament years ago. And many reform people have repeated it multiple times. So, for me, like comparing him to this for that, obviously it's not equivalent. It's not equivalent. But then being like, don't compare me to that, and then just peddle out a complete lie about Jimmy Savile. Now, meanwhile, companies are scrambling for compliance. Meta pilots passport light ID checks. Smaller platforms are just going quiet and geo-blocking sites to the UK. Users companies are trying to dodge fines because they can be fined up to 10% of global turnover if they're not compliant. And even the NHS is weighing in. They're saying medics are warning that losing WhatsApp groups could send patient handovers back to pager error chaos, because some of the powers that are coming into effect that haven't fully yet could also affect things like this. Now, the government's explainer insists the act is about stopping illegal content, protecting kids, and giving users an easy report button. Not about, reading your meme chats, but there will be provisions in the act where it is possible that the government could get into some of our chats. And again, this is very scary stuff. Now, the bottom line, the Online Safety Act has officially gone live, and so has the culture war around it. Now, brace for a lot more of this, because a lot more is about to come, and it's not really going anywhere at all. Novel, is Nigel Farage Jimmy Savile?
Yeah, I cannot speak. I don't want to get sued. But in all seriousness, I think it was a silly comment to make, because there are genuine fears about the online safety bill, and so I think you're almost seeing like the liberal cover up of expanding surveillance as, oh, if you are against this, you're a paedophile, and then the far right going, actually no, don't you dare call me a paedophile, because here's insert X lie that actually the left defends pedophiles. It's ridiculous. But if we look at the online safety bill as a whole, I think it really mirrors surveillance technology and surveillance repression in the name of protecting children. And you have to be very skeptical when people say protecting children in the government, because they're almost never protecting children. This is very similar in my mind to things like Prevent, which are rolled out, genuinely or not, to protect kids, stop radicalization, but end up actually enforcing racist stereotypes and hurting minorities such as Muslim children, and smearing them as terrorists. And I think the problem with the online safety bill that we've seen is, historically, when we are talking about protecting kids, the first people that end up being harmed by this sort of stuff are like the LGBT community, for example. Mental health forms have been inaccessible. Forums for minors, which by the way are banned from HRT now in some aspects, are no longer able to talk about their access to healthcare. And just generally speaking, if you are a kid who cannot speak about their mental health concerns in general, but you've been told right now that you're able to vote, how ridiculous is it that you can't access things like that online, where maybe you can't access it in real life? What is instead going to happen is, if you are a kid, and I've spoken to people that are 16 about their opinions on this, if you're seeing the state take away your little treats, your toys, not actually helping you, you're going to be pushed somewhere else, and you're going to look for a more radical idea or a radical message on how to solve the issues you're facing. And that's where we see the rise of the far right online. And more importantly, when it comes to things like pornography, you're going to see more extreme websites being able to be accessed via banning, porn sites, the 30 or so that they've talked about. And so I think this really represents, and Reform have capitalized brilliantly off this, unfortunately, the ability to groom young children, weirdly enough, talking about protecting children. But this is actually going to help for the far right to groom young children, to make them look like the liberal state are their enemy, and not in the good way, but more so that they want to repress everything that you're talking about. And instead you have to come and flock to our ideology. So I think maybe is it well intentioned? Sure, maybe. In the world we live in, is it going to be used for the right intentions? Absolutely not. Will the left and other minorities be the first ones to face this? Absolutely yes. And I think, if anything, it leaves children in more dire state than actually protecting them. And if you really want to talk about protecting kids, then we need to, look at things like digital rights and looking to, fund services that are chronically underfunded, which can actually help them.
It does beg the question, though, like, what is the answer and what is the solution then? Because I used to be completely against ID or verifying who somebody is online for a various amount of arguments. Like, one of them was the idea that there are people who need to be protected from certain things, like the idea of whistleblowers contacting journalists online, and they have to use like an anonymous account to do so. That's a very important part of democracy, right? Being able to access journalists in different ways and being able to contact them without the fear that you can just be tracked down by the government or any of these things. I have moved away from that simply because of the spread of the far right conspiracy theories and the damage that's done to the world, specifically on social media. I think where I kind of stand right now is that there are softwares and systems available where you can get verified and none of the data at all is actually stored anywhere in any way, and people can talk about a slippery slope. I think for social media, I would like to see some sort of verification of who people are, specifically because of foreign interference. We saw obviously foreign interference about Southport in terms of some foreign accounts trying to stoke violence as well. There's issues with Telegram groups and stuff, which we can talk about a little bit later on in the next story, just because of the spread of that. And it's not the fact that I want to be able to know who everybody is online myself. It's just a case of, if somebody is doing something that is online, that they can still be held accountable. Meaning, right now, if you publish something in a newspaper, right, you know who it is, they can be sued, they can be held accountable. But when somebody's posting online specifically about complete fake news, something that's libelous, something that's potentially illegal, you can't always really at all even sometimes find out who that person is. And I think because of the violence that we're seeing, personally, I'm for social media verification. Doesn't mean it has to be public. It just means that they can be found out who they are, and that is it. And that's where I want to leave it. For everything else, I don't know what the solution is. Like, how do you think, obviously respond to what I've just said about social media, but just everything else, like, what do you think is the best approach for all of this?
I think it speaks to a larger question on how to really fight the far right and the spread of fascism. And I think we need to take a look at, although things like surveillance can help in the short term, the battle against the far right and the rise of populist narratives from the right have to also be fought, via organizing on the ground, but also pressuring and holding our politicians to account, and also, having those organizations that talk about digital rights, for example, coincide with the rise of coincide with the rise of fighting misinformation. And Nordic countries do this really good thing where they have an educational program where they actually teach media literacy. I know, shocker, but they essentially teach their students in schools how to look out for misinformation, how to properly check sources, and more importantly, what do the sources actually talk about? Is it just purely emotions, feelings, themes, or is it facts? Is it statistics? And how do we reach statistics? And there's a wide range of incentivizing and mandating, children learning about sociological methods of research, but also along with that, political media literacy. I think the issue is when we rely on the state to do that for us as the left, historically what happens is it ends up biting us, and it ends up harming us. So while I can understand the need for censorship, not censorship, ID verification for people alongside, spreading far right misinformation on things like X, even TikTok nowadays, I think it's a short-term solution that won't come to the root cause of these issues. And I think we need to look at incentivizing the people that we're raising in our generations to actually combat and fight this. And I think it's more safe if we have these ideas out in the open, but we also have a strong narrative legislatively to push against that. because in my experience and in my opinion historically is when we drive these narratives underground, it's not just harder to take track of them, but it's also harder to combat them because these people also get radicalized and go to underground networks. And we obviously see X right now, but in the early 2000s, it was the revival of far right forums. Nowadays, what we see are Telegram chats, which are extremely hard to monitor. And I think we need to focus on digital legislation in that regard.
Yeah, it is obviously a very complicated issue because we do have to balance freedoms. We have to balance what the government has access to, or even private companies. Of course, we don't want that to be, either used or sold off or used in some sort of malign way. I'll be interested as well for people in the comments. Like, please put in what you think your actual solutions could be around this. And again, I do think it's all well intentioned, but it doesn't always, compute that way when it obviously goes through like the actual mandates of what they're supposed to be. There was talk about like Wikipedia might actually get flagged as something that's not accessible to people. It was getting flagged as like a certain category of websites. Obviously, it has information on everything. There's been reports of people not being able to access certain news on certain websites and forums because it was obviously something that was classified as adult content. And then, we have to balance the idea of like, you obviously don't have a right to access the news, but I think we do have a right not to be interfered with by the government, right? The news doesn't have to be provided to us by that company or by a social media website that's facilitating it. But if a government is mandating that people can't access it out of nothing else, no illegal activity, so to speak, that's when obviously it starts to get troublesome, right? If you're trying to access a news website and it has one article about, I don't know, what's her name, the Bonnie Blue or something like that, and it flags up as like, oh, actually to access this, you need to put in your ID because there's some information here about Bonnie Blue, then this is when obviously it starts to look pretty bad. Let's quickly talk about though, like the idea of like Labour's stance on this, because obviously this is a Tory legislation. I think it started all the way back in like 2017 under Theresa May, and now it's finally gone through. It's been activated. It's in full power, and Labour seem to be completely and utterly fully defending it. And I just feel like, even though again it's done with the right intentions, it's a case of this is something that's going to make them even more unpopular and quite widely, right? I know it sounds, not to get too personal or dirty with it, but a lot of people watch porn. And now every time people are going to log into a porn website and they have to put in their ID or whatever it might be, they're going to think of Keir Starmer. They're going to think of the Labour Party. They're going to associate this government with the idea that they've made me do this and they're defending it. And that's just one aspect of it. So this is going to make them really unpopular, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Keir Starmer kink is the last thing people want. But I think it speaks to how they think that this will genuinely help them fight the far right. Like, this is Labour's idea of a online bill, or a bill that they think, oh, will be brilliant. We've just brought in the ability to vote for 16-year-olds, and this will help combat reform or far right narratives, and it may actually give a bigger ground for us to enter in and actually sweep up many votes perhaps. But I think it's just completely misaligned, and just like everything else Labour does, it's just completely not answering to people's material conditions. No one, like you said, wants to put their identification for small stuff like that because it seems ridiculous, right? The amount of memes I've seen on TikTok already is they're calling it the Gooner ban or the Gooner tax. It's just ridiculous. In fact, I spoke to my younger cousins who are 16, and he's like, I'm not even a porn addict. I just want to listen to Spotify, and I don't want to put my ID in for it. So I think it's one of those things which is a narrative about how liberalism really fails to combat fascism, and in fact it actually emboldens it, because as we've seen, Farage is sort of winning the culture war here, and so are outlets like GB News, and I even saw The Sun, for example, The Rag, talk about this, and they are just making Starmer look like an utter buffoon, because you can't fight far right narrative with this sort of thing. You need to center it back to concerns that people have about their everyday lives, about material conditions, about their bills, about their mental health, and especially for young people who are on the end, receiving end for so much of that, who don't feel like they have representation. This may even just see, Labour concede ground to reform in that regard.
Yeah, and I feel like as well, like there are already tools and options out there for parents to manage this at home in terms of what people can access. And maybe there's just some education that really needs to be done around that in lots of different ways, right? Parents have the tools to manage this, but a lot of them don't use them and activate them. And that's obviously just like the adult content side of things. There's so many more aspects to this legislation, which is very scary, but we won't really find out more about it until more parts of the legislation keep coming into power, because it's like a phased legislation. But in the meantime, let's move on to the next story. But first, if you do wish to support Turn Left at all in any way, obviously just being here absolutely helps. Obviously, like the video, leave as many comments as you can, and keep supporting us through watching the videos after we post them as well. Maybe a little watch back helps with the views. But obviously you can support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. You can join our Patreon. You can give us a one-off donation. You can obviously send YouTube memberships as well through the comments. We usually get quite a lot of those with our lovely, amazing supporters that love watching us here. We love the community that we have here with you guys. We love seeing all the regulars. We love seeing the new faces. And we love having little debates as well. You know, the people who are in our comment section that we have, we disagree with them. We openly do it, and we agree with them. They challenge us, and that's what we like about the community that we've built here. So if you do want to support us, please go ahead and do that. But just being here alone is exactly what we need anyway. So shall we go on to the last story? Now we are going to move on to a more heavier topic, something that's kind of affecting everyone this week. It's been talked about a lot because it's been 12 months since the Southport attack. It was obviously a horrific knife attack at a children's dance workshop in Southport. Obviously, it lit the fuse for Britain's worst civil unrest in a decade. False online claims that the teenage perpetrator was an asylum seeker snowballed into, mosque vandalism, hotel torchings, and nationwide riots. Now, by the time the summer smoke cleared and hundreds arrested on suspicion of violent disorder, there were some post-mortems that make a grim reading of those who were arrested. And I'm specifically talking about the far right. 2 in 5 of those arrested had prior domestic abuse reports. These are the people that say they want to protect our women and children, but as I've always said, for me, the call is always coming from inside the house. Now, the reason obviously why I'm shifting this immediately into the far right and not focusing on the Southport event as in itself, because it was just part of a wider story, right? We're fast forwarding to a year. We're here now, and the resentment hasn't disappeared. It's simply rebranded as, rolling protests outside of hotels, outside of that are housing asylum seekers. Last weekend alone, we saw demonstrations stretch from Epping, which is not too far from where I am, all the way to Southampton, and there was 18 arrests, broken police shields, and just violence. Obviously nothing to the level of what happened around Southport, but it is ready to pretty much blow at any point. Investigators believe far-right Telegram channels amplified the Southport rumours in real time, funneling thousands of would-be marchers to flashpoints. This has now pushed the Home Office to create a new national social media monitoring unit based at the National Police Coordination Centre to flag viral disinformation before bricks start flying. Rights groups are calling it a minority report for Facebook, but chiefs insist it merely plugs the gaping intelligence hole exposed last year. Now, legal lines are also hardening. Earlier this month, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper tabled a prescription order which banned some groups, obviously Palestine Action, but we're not talking about that today. This is about the obscure but violent Maniacs Murder Cult, now making membership a terrorist offence. So think tankers at the Royal United Services Institute, a defence and security think tank, say that some of the last year's rioters as well should have faced terrorism charges, arguing that arson attacks on migrant hotels meet the threshold. Yet the propaganda keeps mutating. Conspiracy clips linking Keir Starmer to a globalist migrant plot rack up millions of views. Anonymous accounts circulate deepfake confessions from supposed Southport witnesses. 1 year on, Southport isn't a healed scar, it's a pressure point. Whether new policing tools and tougher laws can outpace the far right's propaganda machine remains the open question for summer of 2025, because it's nowhere near over yet. Now, Noffel, I wanted to focus this around the far right because obviously it's just everywhere at the moment. I'm gonna do the objective thing. Obviously, not everyone at a hotel protesting is far right, but it's labeled as far right, and I think fairly so because this is far right propaganda. This is being pushed by the far right. This is being fueled by far right conspiracy theories. I do think there are people out there who are genuine and they think because of the propaganda that's been put out there, they have been tricked. But obviously, we do know that a huge chunk of these people who say that they care, even look at the Guardian report. That was, and just to be specific, that was freedom of information requests done at every single policing unit which arrested people, and it showed 2/5 of people accused of domestic violence, and in some areas, I think it was Brighton or Bristol, it was 2/3 of people. So the call is coming inside the house for a lot of these people. We know how violent they are. Tommy Robinson's just fled the country after, knocking somebody out in an incident that we don't have all the details for as of yet. These people, a lot of them who are pushing this are inherently violent. And I don't really have a specific question for you, but where do we go with this? Because it kind of ties into, what we were talking about a few minutes ago about freedoms and stuff and online social media conspiracy theories. Like, where do we go with this?
It's tough because quite bluntly what we're seeing is a rise of fascism, and it happens every couple of decades when there is a massive economic crisis, and I think that's really at the center of all of this, including of course crimes of passion, which is murder, like I'm not going to use his name, the Southport killer, sorry, using TikTok terms. Cases like the Southport killer will always happen, right? But the outcry from it will always be linked to the crises that we are facing, where people are being told that there are radical solutions for complex problems, and their economic issues are rooted in the scapegoating of a massive group. And what has historically worked is, the state conceding to those concerns economically in order to combat and quell down these sort of fears. But as long as the government don't radically change conditions for people, things aren't going to change, and we are going to see already violent people become more and more emboldened, and not just put people at risk, but also legitimize certain narratives that will put the people that they're planning to protect at risk. The idea that rapes happen only to white women from men of migrant backgrounds, the fact that refugees and asylum seekers are more likely to commit said rapes, and small boat crossings are on the rise. It really legitimizes very, very scary realities for women who have constantly also said that it's not about the color, but it's more so about just men. And I do see it not heading in a great direction. Not only are Labour opening the door and legitimizing these sort of narratives by sort of cozying up to reform, but also not doing nearly enough. And generally speaking, I do also think that it's emboldened by the way that we talk about news post Trump. Talking about things like fake news and the age of disinformation. It's only ramped up rapidly in the last 10 years because you can basically say anything online and it can be considered true. And it is centrally to do with economic inequality. And I think I really have a simple answer for it, which is, in my mind, the only way to defeat fascism is socialism. But what can the government do to quell down fears of fascism when capital is in crises is to concede to fix economic inequality and be very, very, very strong on that, because Britain does need radical change. It does need mass investment in public infrastructure so people don't feel like they're getting poorer and poorer, and that will, for most part, solve the scapegoating of a small group of people as the bane of Britain's problems as a whole since the 80s and 90s.
And obviously, the conditions that we're currently seeing economically, the plans that are ahead of us from the Labour Party, just the entire outlook globally. We have obviously looming climate change. We obviously have very simply the rich getting richer. We have depleted resources in certain areas. We have people fighting over everything from cobalt to lithium. I don't know where it's going to go, essentially, because we're facing so many issues over the next few decades that, with the current narrative and the direction that it's going, I don't know exactly where it's going to go. Because let's just say, even if we got let's just say we've got like a democratic socialist government into power, right?
Yeah.
Jeremy Corbyn, a Bernie Sanders type, whatever it might be, just that type of dem socialist, just very general. It feels like to me that like even what we're facing couldn't even be tackled by that. Obviously, I'm not even making this into an argument for any sort of like, socialism or communism. I'm not even trying to make that argument. It just feels like there is, even anyone that's currently within the mainstream political spectrum is not actually offering any actual, I'm going to use the word long-term solutions, because there are some short-term stuff that we can actually do right now. If we had a dem socialist government in power, things probably would be slightly better. They might get slightly better, but it's still, even that's not even going to be enough, even long-term, because we know what happens with the trends. We can be affected by so many global issues. We could be affected by a war. We could be affected by weather. We can be affected by so many different things. And it just feels like, even though there are a lot of people who might love people like Jeremy or Zara, they might love people like even Zandani in New York, right? Any of these figures, it still feels like there's not even anybody actually stepping up into the mainstream who is going to offer, the actual solution that we need. And
Yeah.
is there anybody on your radar who is actually offering that?
I know we won't. It's not really about an argument of systems, but I think it does speak to, and it's impossible for me to not make it about that, because everything is political. I think it just speaks to the fact that money will go where things are popular. Money and capital will go where things can capitalize off. And if the current trend is for the media to create a hostile environment towards migrants, even if Labour passed like a decent policy, right? It will go there. Just as simply how capital flows, unfortunately. And when we take a look at electoral politics, for example, electing people in government, I think it can do quite a bit, especially if, like you said, you have a democratic socialist. But I think you pose a really interesting scenario and a really interesting question, which is, what would happen if we had a democratic socialist? If you had like a lefty, a hard lefty, by most people's mind in government, would it really be enough? And I think the answer is simply probably not, because unfortunately, the systems that create the environment that the government outputs are owned and lobbied by money. And in my opinion, that is at the root of all of this, is the fact that the main issues and ills that we are facing can't solely be solved through reform and transformational politics within government. And I think it needs to come from the grassroots, and it needs to come down from below. So I know we weren't going to make it a discussion about different systems, but I can't help in my mind but to see as a minority that that's the only thing. And I would point to people like the Black Panthers, for example, or point towards different groups that throughout history have taken more radical solutions. And I'm not calling for like a Bolshevik revolution, but in a hypothetical scenario that we're speaking about, I think there are limits to the system that we live in, and it's doomerism, but I think it's reality.
Yeah, it's a bit doomeristic, isn't it? But who knows what's around the corner? One last question before we get off to the comments. Away from material conditions or economic systems, we have even moving away from social media, we have the mainstream media right now, which is just on full attack when it comes to everything from benefits to not taxing the rich to spinning the culture wars. They seem to have calmed down on trans people recently, but I'm sure that will spin up again soon. But obviously, right now it's very much focused around lots of sets of data, and like this is obviously news to yourself, but it's something that I've been looking into in the background, like the Center for Migration Control. Now, I'm not going to go into massive detail about what I've been looking into with the Center of Migration Control, but I will just explain this. They released another report 2 days ago or 3 days ago, which was saying, here is all the crimes that we've got from the Met Police in London related to sexual crimes. And then they've taken the data, they've published it and created a report. And I downloaded it, I looked at it all, and it's just half it's made up. The actual raw data is real. But for example, you've probably seen the infographic running around on GB News and other places. It's like the blue background, the red dots, and it's pointing to Afghanistan's at number one committing these types of crimes and yada, yada, yada. Immediately, the data that they had, the person who ran the data when they're doing it's the 59 and 10,000, they put the population of Afghans in London at 12,000 as part of their data set. quick Google, a literal Google, and obviously a check in a few different sources, there's in and around 40 to 50,000 Afghan nationals in London. This data is getting shown on GB News. It's getting published on the Telegraph. It's in the Spectator. It's in the Sun. It's in every single right-wing media outlet. And then obviously it trickles down into social media, where you'll be on TikTok lives with me, and people will bring this data up about Afghans and Eritreans. And it's just like the data is just wrong. How do they get away with this? How do we hold them accountable? And what can we do to even change this? Because we obviously can't have, the government policing everything that the media puts out, but
Yeah.
how do they even get away with this? It's disgusting.
It is disgusting, and I think you've seen a massive increase of these sort of think tanks prop up and emerge, or these sources that provide themselves as reputable, but you can almost find like little to no data on their background, and it cherry picks statistical illiteracy where people can't understand numbers, where they can't understand the fact that you can collect any sort of data and represent it in any way to make anyone look bad, but it's about your methodology. And a lot of the times these guys don't talk about their methodology. And so, statistical literacy has not just increased because of think tanks, but it's also because of a defunding of humanities and arts, basically themes and subjects which mandate people to go towards the social sciences and study that sort of thing. And so we don't have those people or academics as prominently as we did maybe a couple decades ago, which, by the way, is one of the warning signs of fascism. But forget about that. It's a multifaceted, not just factor, but also the way to tackle it. And, you can talk about legislation and policy, which mandates these subjects which study this academically to prompt other organizations that oppose think tanks to talk about them, or left-wing think tanks, for example, even that are formed of academic consensus and are very open about how they're funded or how their methodology is being used. But I think it's also about media massively, because GB News capitalizes off these freedom of information requests. And I think, it is about, we have an uphill battle against right wing media, which is dominated by and backed by billionaires and millionaires and oligarchs that want to get their message through. But I think it is also one of the solutions could be to look at independent media like people are watching right now in order to combat this. So it is a multifaceted approach and also a multifaceted problem, but there is no one solution to it. And I think we need to look at different avenues to how to combat this, because we can't just squash it, like you said, with government policing.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I just saw a funny comment. We'll come to the comments in just 1 second. But just as an FYI, guys, if you see any of the right-wing media quoting the Centre of Migration Control, it is run by one guy called Robert Bates, who is a reform campaigner. And he is being quoted as a think tank, and he's not. It's one guy, a laptop, and a registered business name, which is called Athelney Campaigns Limited. And I have a feeling that some people in this comment section will know exactly what Athelney is, which is a town in England, and very small summary of the history. That's where Alfred the Great, the Anglo-Saxon king, fought off the foreign invaders, the Danes, and he's named his think tank's company trading name after that. And yes, that is a call to and a signal to the far right. It absolutely is. Yes. But more on that in the future. Curtis, producer, how are we doing?
How you doing, guys? Phenomenal show so far. Really enjoying it. And we've got quite a lot of comments. I think, unsurprisingly, we've got a lot of comments on the online safety bill. So most of our discussion is probably going to be that. But I love your sort of, especially Noff, your monologue on what we're going to do in terms of tackling the far right, which we can get into, because obviously a lot of questions discuss that too. Just the one super chat today, but I tell you what, it's always appreciated, from Tic Tac Music. I've realised that they've been saying in the chat not to say their real name because they do music, right? And I don't want to dox them, so I am going to refer you to as Tic Tac Music. I know your real name, but I'm going to refrain from it. £2 super chat. Performative conditional recognition is a no. That is in reference to Keir Starmer's sort of dangling of the carrot, recognising Palestine as a state, as a bargaining chip. So I know you've spoken about it, but let's get a response from both of you on this comment.
Novel?
No, I agree, because, from different perspectives, especially even if you are looking at this from a liberal perspective, it's just going to anger Palestinians because you're reducing their humanity down to simply what Israel has doing. And in fact, what it actually does as well is not just show that Palestinians and Israelis aren't equal, but it also shows that you can only have a state when Israel is being the good guy, which is extremely, extremely flawed. And we know the way Zionism operates, Israel inherently will not be the good guy because it's a settler occupational state built on Jewish supremacy.
Sorry, I was
Anything,
just
Lewis? Or
sorry. No,
cat, isn't
my
it?
room's very warm, and I put my fan on while
Oh,
I
right.
was talking.
That's good. I can't hear your fan, so that
Oh no,
that noise
I
came
turned it
through.
off just as I unmuted.
Right. Okay.
But
Fair
yeah,
enough.
obviously he's pissed off both sides. It's ridiculous because it's basically it's giving the choice of you can either starve or have a state, but you can't have but you know that's it basically your options. And it's frustrating because he's the one who obviously said it was a virtue signaling, just obviously talking about recognizing Palestine, and obviously now he's doing it, but he's saying it matters now because he's using it essentially as a bargaining chip. This should have happened a while ago, and what they should be levering right now is trade. They should be, obviously, in an ideal world, they would have done this already. But if they're going to pull any lever right now, it should be actual trade, actual trade, and sanctions on the government, like the actual core of the government, not just the fringe ministers. But even still, nothing they have technically done has changed anything on the ground, and that's fair to say. Nothing that they have done has changed anything.
Incoming last minute, Third Eye Blind is given 10 turn left membership. So thank you so much for your generosity.
Thank
It
you, Third
means
Eye.
so much. It means a lot. We got a nice comment here, which is stream is looking slick, guys. And this is obviously in reference to, I mean, Lewis, your setup is pretty bang on. I've got to
What
say.
did Kevin say about my setup the other week, though?
What did he, oh, he said that it looks like you're in the bathroom.
He says this
because
looks
of
like bathroom tiles.
your
I was
sound,
so
your
annoyed.
sound panels, right? Because they're like grey, light grey. He kind of said it looked like a public toilet. I like, to be fair, with the board behind you and with the little Election Islands card, then that looks really good. Someone has also praised your setup, Noffel. I'm trying to find the comment. Here we go. Jim Speak. Noffel's setup hasn't even glitched today. The fix was definitely worth the money because his commentary is great. Obviously, yeah, the last two times, especially last time, there's a bit of issue with the glitch, isn't it? But I'll tell you what, it's looking bang on now. Not a single glitch, and we can hear your commentary in all its glory.
Yeah, no. The funny thing is, I didn't actually spend too much money. I told Lewis and Curtis about this in the background, but it was because I've moved, and so I had to get everything shipped up across, and the software unfortunately just didn't work on my phone. But yeah, luckily no expense. But I'm glad you guys are liking the commentary, and I'm glad it looks like more professional on my end too.
The coloring looks really nice as well.
It's
Just as
really
like a
nice colouring.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I've literally just got like an IKEA lamp. I wanted to get a softbox and I didn't have one, so
Oh, this
it's
looks
just an
good.
IKEA.
It's looking.
Yeah, it's just a lamp and the windows open. So you know, as long as the audience like it, that's all that matters.
Jim again coming in hot says this motherfucker definitely owns a katana to go with that screening wall. I had to Google what it was because I wasn't sure.
You know what
it's
katana
What it
is?
is. No, it's a sword, isn't it?
no, it's not mine. Maybe my girlfriend has one because this is hers. I've just stolen it off
Maybe.
her.
Don't
So,
know.
yeah, who knows? Maybe she's planning one for me. I don't know.
Well, that's a bit scary, isn't it? Okay, that is all for like the jokey comments. We've got the serious politic too. We'll start with Reese Clements. Starmer will last until May when the locals are held. Then it's either he goes or Labour MPs split into two parties. So yeah, I want to hear your response to this comment. Obviously, the Labour government is really unpopular. Keir Starmer is very unpopular. Reese seems to think that May could be a time when he goes. Do you think this is possible? Do you think he will at least write until the next election? I think a lot of people are betting on the fact that he won't try and fight the next election, but who knows?
I think it's possible. Obviously, there's no mechanism in the Labour Party to get rid of a leader, but maybe it could just be like a Johnson type situation where people just start resigning. I don't know, to force him out, perhaps. It's very possible that the May elections might do it. They've essentially got obviously less than a year to start improving their image. the only thing that could make him survive, just to step away from our opinions on Labour and the country, is that if polling starts to favour him more, because then he can at least show that it is going up. And if he can't show that, I just can't see how he can stay after another disastrous local. And who knows what the setup of the next local is in terms of who's got what amount of councils before, because obviously the last one was very much about the Conservatives and less about Labour.
Yeah,
What do you think, Novel?
it's tough to say as well because anything can happen very quickly. Labour could pass one thing or one policy like we're seeing right now, and it could have a way bigger impact than maybe this one or even a smaller one. So, I think it's quite tough, especially on the second part of that comment talking about Labour MPs splitting into two parties because. I think there is still a large amount of Labour MPs that want to keep a broad church, and overall they do want to. I think they do want to, despite not having Starmer there, but focus on working class, or material conditional concerns. So I think it's tough to say. I can't really give an opinion on it.
Yeah, really interesting. I think, I mean, making political predictions is something that we should never really do because it's, you never know. So I don't think Starmer's going to fight the next election, but whether he's going to go in, in May, I think he'll probably stay on for longer than that. TikTok Music again says, did anyone see Julie Heartless Brewer? I quite calling her Julia Hartley Sewer, but Heartless is also quite accurate.
Yeah,
saying there is no starvation. So obviously we've
Yeah.
seen images of children malnourished, and so much so that even the Daily Express posted it and think, oh my god, the Daily Express are even doing it, and yet JHB said on Talk TV that she doesn't believe it. It's just propaganda.
Yeah, so that's in response to the campaign that Israel's pushing out right now. They found, I think it's like 2 different photos of children that, I'm sure it's true what they're saying. They're saying that these children have like genetic conditions and health conditions which pre-exist October 7th. And that's why they look like that. And that's where the lie comes in, obviously, because it's probably true they have genetic conditions, but ultimately they're exacerbated by the conditions that they live in, right? I have someone in my family. I already spoke about this on a video earlier that I did for myself, but I have a member of my family who is tube fed because they have a rare genetic condition, and without the tube, without the regular supply of liquid food, they wouldn't survive. And Israel's created those conditions. So yes, you can argue that their condition is obviously affecting their outcome, but it's also because of the conditions that Israel's have put them in as well. It's a disgusting piece of propaganda that they're trying to twist. It's all Israel.
Yeah, I think they also, I think in the same show, I can't remember if it was the same different one. They also talked about how look at the fat mothers in the back and the starving kids, and it's like, yeah, because kids have tiny immune systems. You dumb fuck! Like the children are going to be affected first. It's completely disgusting to weaponize, what a mother could possibly be going through, right? And just biological facts as. Yeah, the mum's just eating too much. I mean, it's honestly sickening. It's disgusting.
Didn't she call the mother chubby? I think in the clip.
Yeah. She did, which makes no sense because not only is malnutrition shows signs of bloating, right? But it's literally the fact that the child will be affected first, just simply by. I thought these guys care about biological reality, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Good point. Vicky Clee. Why would Savile need to commit his crimes online? He had the whole power of the BBC and the Royals' approval to help him in his crimes. That's a very good point because in terms of the kind of crimes that are committed online anonymously, someone like Savile didn't need that because he had pretty much the entire establishment behind him and covering up for him. And I tell you what, this online safety bill isn't going to stop that kind of crime, something that's embedded within the system.
It's interesting as well, even with like Jimmy Savile. I use his name all the time, actually. And the reason why I use it is because he was never convicted. And I love coming across people who you can reference this to any conversation. I brought it up literally yesterday when I was talking with somebody who was saying, oh, we can't say it's a genocide until it's declared by the courts. And I said, fine, tell me Jimmy Savile's innocent then because he never got convicted. And then they shut the fuck up. And I use it in almost like it's when you get, men who are saying, oh, there's false accusations or this person was, I do it with Tommy supporters when they say, oh, he wasn't convicted of this. Or, okay, tell me Jimmy Savile's innocent because he never got convicted. That's an appropriate way to use Jimmy Savile's name, I think.
Yeah, I think it also just speaks to the wider fact of, protecting children is often talked about online so much more, and we often take a look, and politicians often take a look at having parents think that it's about music or it's about simply technological access, when so much of it is actually in person, real life, and it's more likely to actually happen in your own home. So I think it completely, it's really disgusting, but the politicization of young women, especially, and just young children in being harmed and whatnot, when in reality these things usually happen, as Vicky stated, because of power and influence. It really just, like I said in our first segment, it puts children at more harm because you're legitimizing these narratives.
Yeah. And just also to remind everybody, obviously, because we love misusing statistics, apparently it's a hot thing to do right now, is that, until Sarah Pochin became the new MP for Reform, technically 25% of Reform MPs are convicted criminals for domestic violence. Now that they've got a new person in the Welsh Assembly, technically 100% of Reform Welsh Assembly members are convicted criminals. But again, no one ever pays attention to this. No one pushes them on this because they usually get to control the narrative. But I don't want Jimmy Savile's name to be used in this way. I don't like it. But it's almost like nice to see Nigel on the back foot at the moment with this, just because I don't think it's really winning anything for him from what I've seen. Like, people, even though it's like, hot and flamey, no one really seems to care at the same time. I don't know. That's just what I've seen from it.
I mean, I just think with look, my first reaction to Peter Kyle calling Farage like on the side of Farage, Farage on the side of Farage. I mean, he's always on the side of himself. Farage on the side of Savile. It made me laugh. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was funny because I think it's a stupid point, by the way, from Peter Kyle. You do not stand on the side of sex offenders and rapists because you oppose censorship online. But my first reaction was, the right wing are the biggest cry-bullies, and they always smear their opponents so much. But as soon as put on them, they start whinging like babies. And Farage has come out, and all of the Reform lot have come out and said he needs to apologise. I'm like, they were rallying against the briefcase politics that they're now perpetuating. I thought they were populists. I thought they were, sick of this sort of milquetoast sort of critiques that politicians throw at each other. But it just shows that the right wing are massive cry-bullies, that they want everyone else to play by different rules. I mean, what Farage should have done is just basically said, you're an idiot, Peter Kyle, who cares, I'm going to move on. But this sort of like, oh, he needs to apologise. It's so pathetic. But having said that, I do think Peter Kyle's comments were ridiculous because, yeah, it's... when people look at that, the implication is, oh, is he accusing me of being on the side of Savile because I'm against censorship? So it was another self-own by the Labour Party, I think. Autumn leaves. The kids are far more internet savvy than the knobheads who came up with this. I mean, always the way, because there's a lot of politicians who make decisions and they are so boomer when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also as well, just like the extra levels of compliance as well. Like, you could even argue this is just going to harm people who want to maybe even do business in the UK, if you want to take an argument that they would like, in a way. I don't know, because it's just extra layers of compliance which are making it difficult for people to navigate online. Oh, I think they'll end up backtracking.
Yeah, I think it also shows, Autumn's comment also shows how just weak of a justification it is to kids to say, we're protecting you by making you sign into Spotify and monitor other parts of your lives. And so it's not just about how you appeal to young people, but it's just about the effectiveness of it. Which if anyone has seen young people talk about this online, they know it's a sham. They think it's ridiculous. They're like, you just gave me the right to vote and you allow 16-year-olds to have sex, but, I can't access, They are very confused by it, but more seriously, they are very upset by it too.
I mean, Labour don't really have a holistic narrative to spin, because you're right. People are pointing out the contradictions between letting 16 and 17-year-olds vote, but also under 18s can't view things online. Now, of course, I don't think there's an actual contradiction. Like, I want 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, but I don't want them watching porn. I don't think it's contradictory. But when you're playing politics and you're in the political game, narratives can be spun, and it certainly does look confusing. Just want to bring up TikTok Music. He's gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciate it. Melee Maggots. I think you might be new, unless you've changed your name. I've not seen you before. Another 5 Turn Left memberships.
Thank
And
you, Mello.
Third Eye Blind with a £5 super chat. We need to go back to porn mags and hedgerows. Cannot age check that. I mean, they do ID you at the shop, but there are obviously sneaky ways how you can try and get the magazines. So yeah, more comments obviously to come.
Go to your local art museum. See all the lovely paintings.
I'm just gonna call you Cat because I can't literally say what
Oh,
the name is.
this is such TikTok language. PDF file.
Yeah, so Farage accusing
Yeah.
Starmer of defending a paedophile, because we can say that on here, while he's best mates with Donald Trump. I hate Starmer as much as anyone, but yikes. I mean, this is a good... It's a good
Release
move.
the list.
It's I mean, it's seeing all these right wingers still defend Trump, yet at the same time are backing our boys when they go rioting in Southport to protect our young girls. It's basically, if you are, and by the way, like, if you're poor and you're brown, if there's a sex crime being committed, you're a monster. Which, by the way, you are a monster. If you're a rich white billionaire, then do you know what? There were days when they were just men being men.
Yeah.
The same old. What's interesting with Farage as well is I think he's actually successfully somewhat distancing himself from Trump. He's definitely talking less about him, and not even since Epstein. I said this to you the other day, I think, Curtis. Like, I want to see a journalist ask Farage about the Epstein files and see what he says, because I want to see where his position is on it. Because I think he'll probably end up going like, oh, if there's more to see, we should probably find out. Something like very neutral like that. But release the files that apparently existed but now don't exist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Apparently Obama made the list now.
Of course, it has to be Obama. When something goes wrong, blame
Wait,
Obama because he's
just
that.
just to quickly add this in. Did you not hear about what happened yesterday with Kash Patel in the FBI? Apparently, they found some secret documents that were locked away in a black bag in a hidden room in the FBI, and now Kash Patel has handed it over. I can't wait to see what this distraction is about to be. But yeah, something's about.
But the thing is, these distractions aren't working anymore. They might work for other things, but MAGAs are so desperate to see the Epstein files too. It's not a political thing. Both left and right, everyone wants to see it, right? And they're not falling for the distraction. Adaptive base. The left needs to do more to win the free speech argument. The far right has too much monopoly over it. I mean, I personally agree with that. And I don't think it's even necessarily changing a lot of our policies. I think it's just being better with our communication. One, pointing out the contradiction on the right wing when it comes to free speech, because it's never free speech for them. It's free speech for them, not for everybody else. And two, just being open about your own view. Like, for me, I would happily say, look, I don't support free speech absolutism, right? There's certain things I don't think you can say. Having said that, though, the right wing say they support free speech absolutism, and they're very censorious.
I'll let Lewis go on it first.
I'm not gonna lie. I was reading a comment and I got really distracted.
I'll go. In that case, I'll say no. I agree. I think I do think that, like you said, Curtis, I think the left has shown enough over the last couple of years that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence. And, we see that cancel culture is a term used, but it's just you lose your job if you're a fascist, by the way, which happened to the guy that went on the Jubilee show with Mehdi Hassan, and I'm glad he did. But I think there also needs to be a degree of being open about how, certain censorship and suppression, us supporting the short-term aims of, maybe being against certain hate speech towards minorities, can sometimes legitimize structures that will come back to bite us as well. And I think we have to do, like the comment says, more to win on that ground by making it very clear that these debates and these comments are only being flown because the right have nothing to offer working class people or your average person that doesn't really give a fuck about culture wars. And I think John Melecon basically talked about this when in France, I believe it was some opposition member of the right was being investigated for embezzling funds. And he basically talked about how removing said person from elections is actually undemocratic. And I think he made a really compelling case there, because the act that was, for anyone that doesn't know, the right wing or the far right MP has basically did a standard practice in politics that many parties do, even leftist parties within the French electoral system. But I think it's very clear, and I think he made the good move to show that, state repression in some cases shouldn't be fought for by the left always, because one, it will come back to bite you, but two, if it ever does happen to you, then people are going to see you as a hypocrite and be like, and the right will go, oh, see, the state supports them, but it doesn't support us.
Yeah. JK says we will be blocked from seeing the atrocities in Gaza when Starman says Netanyahu is a good guy and the UK will not recognise Palestine. So obviously we've seen some kind of censorship on social media sites. It's very clear that this is one of the things that can be used, which is to block these important videos and images, as harrowing as they are, is important for evidence.
Obviously, we're going to have to see how far censorship goes in the future and see where it goes. Obviously, we should be pushing back against it now in every way that we can, and obviously have nuanced arguments along the way about what's appropriate and what's not. But obviously, this is going to get worse. The thing that I'm scared about as well in the future is just the collection of data as well.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it in certain aspects. There's no point getting into that, but just general, the idea that private companies are just amassing data on people for the purposes of AI and how that could potentially be weaponized in the future, right? You could very easily see, this is probably very possible right now, like you're applying for a job and somebody could just type in your name through an AI system and it could literally tell you everything about that person online and everything that they've ever been attached to that it can find. Actually, I can do that now, but you can only do it with like public figures and stuff. But ultimately, it's that type of level, and that technically probably wouldn't be illegal either. There's probably lots of loopholes and stuff around this because it's public information and stuff. Like where we're going to go with, it's like, oh, you tweeted this out 12 years ago, and it's not even something that's like that bad. It could just be something that's sensitive to the company, and then that's it. Like you might not have a job, and that could become a standard system that all employers use across the country, right? So we need to be so careful where we're going with censorship and data as well, and that's super important. And also when it comes to misinformation with AI, because that's also getting out of control too. Just the other day, speaking of Gaza, there was a photo that went viral from Gaza of a young girl holding a ball, and I think she was like between a brick. It was a very good, objectively good photo and very powerful. And somebody asked Grok, "Is this real?" And it said no. It was from, I think Grok claimed it was from Syria. And putting Grok aside on the fact that it's Elon Musk's, like a standard AI bot should be able to, detect things like this. And it said no, it was from Syria. And then they had to correct the bot because somebody was like, no, this is a photo from AP News. So again, there are so many elements of censorship, information, AI that are all converging right now at the same time, and it's getting very scary.
Bad technology.
Yeah.
It's bad technology.
Yeah.
A lot of the
Also, fuck Palantir. Sorry, just saying that.
A lot of the discourse surrounding this, though, misses a big factor in this, and that is the fact that the government has essentially sold this off to private companies. So it's not like a strong, protected government operation where they have access to facial recognition and bank details. Obviously, that's not a good thing. But if the government is going to roll out this thing, I would rather it was in the hands of the government and it was really, really, watertight, and it was had really good security. But actually, private companies are dealing with this, and all that just tells me is they're going to sell this information, or rather, they don't need to sell it if private companies are operating this. They already have our information, and that can come, like I said, if companies want to look up your history, whether they can fire you or not, or even stuff like ads. Learning about an individual person through metadata and now through AI and facial recognition, there's going to be targeted ads. So I'm looking at this from a capitalist consumerist perspective, and it's utterly, utterly depressing. And I think this kind of leans into this next one, which isn't necessarily consumerism, but it's an issue with security. Scottish Soul says, look at the T app in America that was hacked, and the women using the act were leaked, all their data. There is nothing in place for these protections. Now, of course, these things can happen anyway, but with this new online safety bill, it makes this threat even worse. With all that information about, so much information about you can be hacked and exposed for all.
But you don't even need detailed information to cause damage. Like, obviously, that was hacked, which is something that's illegal. There was a story from a few years ago where, obviously, almost every single company that collects data and they anonymize it in whatever different way, they sell it on. And Grindr is one of those companies too. And you can buy data from Grindr, and it's like geographical data and patterns and age and stuff like this. And a Catholic organization bought, I don't know the specifics, they bought data off of Grindr and managed to match the data to specific people within the Catholic Church, like priests who were obviously secretly gay, closeted, and not doing anything illegal, and managed to expose them and ruin their lives. And they did this with multiple people. Actually, I think the same organization did this twice. And that's just information that you can buy from Grindr. So imagine what damage can be done in the future with everything that's out there, that's already trolled by all these AI models. It's already there, it's in their systems, and they're just waiting for more technology in the future to be advanced so they can use it in whatever way that they want.
Novel, anything to add?
Not necessarily. I mean, and it's just I guess just to say it's not something that we haven't seen before with like scandals with Facebook and whatnot. But I think it's also, like Lewis alluded to, it's about hacking and selling information to data brokers. I think one of the interesting things I found though was with this whole Face ID verification things. One of the biggest companies in the UK that would be used for the online safety bill in terms of Face ID, and Spotify, for example, was the CEO behind that company, and I'm gonna have to find it. It starts with an M. Is the CEO of multiple different companies, and so it is really interesting, and it raises a conversation about how not just how much can you trust private companies when they are also a part of subsidiaries of larger conglomerates, which are also partnerships with even bigger companies, but also just like how the UK government will often pass policies, and we won't think about the fact that they are acting as middlemen or a consultancy tunnel for private contractors. Maybe you know a guy in government that can get you a good contract. Maybe your guy knows a guy that knows someone in government that can get you a contract and doesn't necessarily care about the ethical concerns that are raised by your the way you make profit or the way you sell data.
I think as well in the future, I think I'd like to see more action against specific CEOs of companies. I know obviously the founder of Telegram was held accountable for some of the stuff that he did in France, but that's because he also owns the company as well.
We
But
did see one kind of action, didn't we, last year or
Which
earlier
one?
this year?
Yeah.
When the penny's going to drop.
Huh?
So we need to see more action and accountability against CEOs. So we did see one this year in America.
Oh. No comment.
No comment.
But yeah, I feel like when you extend these fines to companies themselves, they just pass that cost off to consumers. Facebook's been fined so many times, literally billions, and it's just like, oh, that's 4 weeks of profit for us. Like, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. Obviously, they want to avoid it. I'd like to see laws being brought in to hold personal like board members, large shareholders accountable as well, for actions that their company are doing in terms of a lot of these fines that companies are getting put upon them, because I feel like that would actually truly make the difference in making platforms a little bit safer, to incentivize them to make them safer too.
We could. I'm not a tanky, but we could do the China method, perhaps. I mean, it's legal, no? What they do to billionaires, which is often just seizing
disappear them.
Yeah, they either disappear, seize their assets, tax them to oblivion, or the other thing I don't endorse, which happens in Minecraft. But yeah.
Carl, in terms of talking about porn website, Starmer is 100% the type to leave comments. I imagine though he's sort of the one would leave comments but wouldn't speak about the acts. He'd be commenting on like the wallpaper or something. Oh, it's a very good color of the wallpaper. But Specs being Farmer, the only way to fight fascism is socialism. Of course, that is in response to what Noffel was saying. I completely agree. When
Unless
they go more radical,
socialism at the same time.
say again.
Unless it's National Socialism, like fascism.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But I agree. They go radical, we go radical. You can't fight fascism with milquetoast liberal centre left fixing capitalism. It's got to be socialism.
Agreed. I think the only thing I want to say is that I made a video on it a while ago, actually a couple of days ago, and I actually got into a bit of an argument with Tilly from Cambridge, who debated Charlie Kirk on this.
Yeah.
And she was talking about debate, and I was like, debate is really good, but I think you might be slightly overestimating how far you can use debate against fascism. But I did prompt her to have a conversation about it because I wasn't arguing with her. I was like, you're a massive figure. Let's talk about watering down socialism to even democracy. But I never got it. I never got
Yeah,
a
like
response back there.
obviously Tilly went viral for that. Like I feel like the format that Charlie Kirk was in, is it Oxford or Cambridge? I can't remember.
I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it is irrelevant anyway. I think that format is the perfect format for doing what they want to do. It's professionals there. There's professors there who got involved. It's a wide audience at a juncture of people's lives where they're changing their mind about things. But I feel like as soon as you move away from that and just take it online, because obviously she's probably received a lot of messages telling her how good she is and all this type of stuff, that she's just immediately
Which she is, yeah.
she's good. She's a good debater, but she's immediately going to fall down that trap of like thinking that she can probably make a difference by being an online debater or something, but ultimately doesn't do anything. The format that she used originally at the Oxford Club or whatever it is, like that's fine, that's great. Anything else online doesn't do shit.
Yeah,
it's pointless. And Jubilee.
I'm sorry, but I had to bring up this comment. Starmer will point out background inconsistencies. That mug wasn't there in the last mug. Ruin the mood. 0 out of 10.
What do you think his favorite category is?
Interesting.
Yeah. Tool making. I don't know.
Tool making. Oh, very good, very good. Carl says Lewis is a commie confirmed. We're slowly working on it.
I'll let you believe whatever you want to believe.
Specs, press reform is really, really needed. Having the media in such a small number of hands is why it's like this. This was in response to your back and forth when it comes to like what do we do in terms of misinformation and the far right, specifically in terms of the false numbers, not really. Okay, false numbers is wrong. The manipulation of statistics that show Afghans are committing way more crimes than other people, and obviously this has been misconstrued. But like, how do you tackle that? I mean, do you come up with your own statistics, or you come up with a true statistic? That doesn't break through.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Spec says it's got to do with the fact that media is concentrated in the hands of the few.
Yes.
I just say I'm just gonna go full fascist. Let's just lock them up.
It's tough, like me and Lewis said, and like I said in that segment, it's such a multifaceted approach because there's so many different ways it comes to fruition in the first place. You can't necessarily control private ownership. If, like I said, if capital flows that way, there's nothing you can really do about it. You can't legislate it, right?
Yeah.
Unless you want like a communist government, but that's not going to happen. But I think the one thing people on the left, generally the broad left, can do is just keep using populist narratives and make it clear that culture wars are for division. They are to distract from the real issues, and you can't really trust the people in power, even if you think they're going to deliver what you want. And I think that is the thing that can break the most through people on not just an individual basis, but through a campaigning basis.
Okay, final comment. Graham Sudworth. I read an interesting statistic recently. It said that 100% of Turn Left YouTube channel members are hotties.
Look at all this lack of definition. That looks like I've got more definition because of the lighting, but I promise you there's nothing there.
I mean, I think I saw that statistic, and I'm pretty sure it's 100% bang on. It's been confirmed.
Yeah. It's fact checked.
It's fact checked by me.
As far as I'm aware, none of us have got criminal records either, but who knows what might come out in the future.
Therefore, it's true. That concludes the comments. I do apologise. It's 9:15, which is an hour and 45 minutes already. But I'm going to hand it back over to you, Lewis.
Thank you, producer. And thank you to everyone else. My face looks really big on the camera today. I love it. Maybe I need to move my camera a little bit back. But anyway, thank you, obviously, Noffel, for a great chat. I think people really do love and appreciate your critical analysis because you very much make it into material conditions, constantly bring it back to the reality. I love getting caught up in other forms of political analysis. I enjoy it in many ways, obviously, but you're always there to ground us back into what actually matters in terms of material conditions and what we actually really need to do to make change. So thank you very much for your contribution.
No problem. I really appreciate being on here as usual.
And great fucking lighting. Great fucking lighting. Looks amazing.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. Obviously, we will be back tomorrow. I'm waiting for Curtis to correct me on that just in case something's happened to tomorrow's show. Like I didn't know one of the shows were cancelled earlier this week and now I'm forgetting. But I think we're back tomorrow. We're definitely back tomorrow. Yeah? Okay, he said yes. He said yes in the background. We're back tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, if you do want to support us, you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support and give us a one-off donation, join the Patreon, or, just support us by being here, watching us and contributing in the chat. It's been great today. So many comments and thank you so much. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow and thank you for joining us.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.